You're listening to Denver Wine Radio, the podcast about Colorado wine. My name is Paul Bonaquisti. I'm the winemaker at Bonaquisti Wine Company, an urban winery I launched back in 2006 in Denver, Colorado, where I've been making and learning about wine ever since. I'm sitting down with other wineries and wine experts to find out what makes Colorado wine so unique and to help you find the wines you like to drink. And now, let's put some altitude in your glass. Welcome to Denver Wine Radio. Brad Page from Colorado Cider Company in the house.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Colorado Cider Company. I remember the first time I met you because you came in here into the winery, and I don't remember why you came in.
You don't remember what I was selling?
I don't remember what. Yeah, I remember
I think it was a tasting of some sort.
There might have been, but I remember Keith Miller was. I haven't seen him for a while, but we were in here doing a thing, talking about wine, and then you came in. Maybe you just came to visit, but then you'd mentioned you were getting ready to open a cidery.
Oh, that's right. I remember that.
And you were telling us about it. Both Keith and I thought you were nuts.
You were right.
We knew nothing about cider. We were like, after you left, we were like, oh my God, what's this guy doing? So what are you doing? And I think that was probably 10, 12 years ago. Because how long, tell me about Colorado Cider Company.
We sold our first cider in April of 11. So we were working we leased our space in the fall of 2010. So 10 years plus.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah.
What is cider? Because, and I know what it is, but for those of our friends listening.
I mean, the traditional definition and sort of the way the government classifies it.
Yeah.
They can't classify it as a fruit wine, but cider is a fermented fruit beverage made from apples. So, the big places that make it historically were France, Spain, and the UK. There are ciders in northern Italy and Germany, but the big three cider countries are Spain, France, and the UK. So, in the United States, was something that existed, obviously, when people were settling the country and bringing apples over from Europe, and apples grew real well on the East Coast, and they were fermenting anything they could. There weren't a lot of grapes around. I don't know. I imagine the French were trying to do some stuff up in Quebec, but cider was just sort of the farm stand fermentable before a bunch of Germans came over and they started cultivating barley. But it's got a long history, and then it was disappeared for years, and so people kind of blame it on Prohibition, but I think it was sort of pre-Prohibition. And so this has been a little renaissance in cider in the last 15 years, I'd say. And,
yeah. So were you the first cidery in Colorado?
There was a guy over on the Western Slope in Cedar Edge, Sean Carney, that had Blossom Wood. He was growing some apples over there, very small. He was doing mostly farmers markets, made great stuff. He's no longer making cider, but so I was technically the second. And then there's about
that's pretty good
15 to 20 here now.
Yeah, so, 15 to 20.
Yeah.
You're the cider pioneer of Colorado.
Yeah. I guess so.
Well, you are.
I'll take it.
Okay, good. Yeah, so cider, like you said, it's been growing in popularity but it's still, I think most people, at least, coming into the winery here, and I tell them, hey, we have cider, and that's for the people that kind of curl their face at wine. They really want to have a beer. Right. So I point them in that direction, but it's gotten better. But most people they think cider, and they think the non-alcoholic sweet juice you would buy at the shelf on the store.
Yeah. So, the term cider in the rest of the world means fermented apple juice. So, there's different stories about why cider became basically juice. Most people kind of think of it as fresh pressed, cloudy from the farm stand, but really, if you ask a Brit or a Frenchman or a Spaniard, they just call it apple juice, right? So cider means alcohol. So, it's a thing we've been trying to work on, but I don't know. you can't really tell people you stupid person who calls it.
Yeah, you can't do that.
But I mean, it's changed quite a bit. So I mean, people know when they hear cider now that it could have alcohol in it. I mean, we still run into people that ask, "Is there alcohol in this?" And yeah. So I mean,
although most of it's lower. It's basically a lower alcohol.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
I mean, legally, it can't be over 6% or something like that.
8.5% is I mean, we had the law changed a few years back nationally because it used to be 7. Now it's 8.5. I mean, basically, it's because of how much sugar is in apples. So, wine is. What do you think of wine? 12 to 15
Yeah,
range?
yeah.
And that's just because of the density of sugar in the grapes, right?
Right.
So in apples, same thing. And so it was 7% because the Brits had come over and had the law changed in the 90s because they were the only ones that were selling cider over here. And it was a big company, Bulmers, and they were making, sort of more sweet soda pop type ciders. So they didn't really want to go over 7. And I mean, it's still the majority of ciders made in the U.S. now are made from dessert fruit and 5 to 6%. And that's the majority of the market. But it's changed significantly in that a lot of people are growing out traditional cider apples, which is more like wine. There's flavors in cider apples that are more like wine grapes, and there's tannin and things. But that's still just a teeny tiny part of the market. So
yeah, what are some of those? So yeah, let's talk about those cider apples.
Right.
But then in general, you can make cider from any apples too.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I always say it's a little bit like table grapes and wine grapes.
Okay.
So the market, from a cost standpoint, there's so many dessert apples, basically culinary apples, people eating apples that are in the market. That's where most of the juice comes from, and those apples are generally sweeter and just don't have a lot of flavor besides sweetness. Mm-hmm. So if you think about fermenting those, it's like all you get is the alcohol from the sugar and not a whole lot of background. I guess it'd be kind of like making wine from table grapes.
Right.
That's the analogy I always use.
That's a good analogy.
I mean, the traditional ciders in places in Europe and probably even in the United States way back when were apples that had tannin. And I mean, the British have the best term for cider apples. They call them spitters because it's really not something you want to eat, but they're great for fermenting.
Because they're bitter or more acid, higher.
Well, I mean, there's different ones. I mean, so what most cider makers are trying to grow are bitter sweets, which are high tannin, high sugar. There's bitter sharps, high acid, high tannin. Sharps mean acid. It's interesting. The apples that are grown here in the Western Slope tend to be higher acid than if you think about most dessert apples like you buy in the grocery store, mostly from Washington. Besides the Granny Smith, you might have pink ladies or a little higher acid, but most of them are pretty low in acid and high in sugar. So the cider apples people are trying to cultivate, tannin is really what people are looking for. Just to have some, I always call it sort of an earthy structure. It's just more like a red wine, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
Not as robust, obviously.
So the other, this past weekend, I opened a bottle of your Newtown Pippin.
Pippin, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Newtown Pippin is sort of used to be a commercial apple that was grown a lot. I think it's originally from New Jersey or Long Island. It's a East Coast apple, and that's actually the apple I think that Martinelli's makes.
Really?
Yeah. So it's a really interesting apple. It's got a little bit of a banana character to it, and so most of those sort of heirloom apple varieties kind of disappeared because it became more about what you could truck and would keep and wouldn't bruise or wouldn't get mealy. So that's why when you go to the grocery store that you only have 8 varieties of apples, and there's thousands of varieties of apples, but you don't see very many of them in the grocery store. So, but the Newtown Pippin's become a popular one for cider makers. Depending on where you can live. We have some in our orchard on the Western Slope. I'm not sure it's something that will be a keeper for us, but I think we have like 50 trees or something.
You planted orchards?
Yeah. So, I mean,
how long ago?
2013 was our first planting. And then,
how long does it take for an orchard to take?
Well, I'm trying to think you've got this block 1 here. We're just about to label our 6th season. So,
oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you plant an orchard and you get 3-4 years. You can start
4 years probably.
get some apples.
Yeah. But even that first
and then
block,
it grows in.
Yeah. That's maturing and we're getting more apples. We also have, we have about 4,000 trees. The 4th block we planted 2 years ago, and we're planning an extension of that next year. It's a lot of work, even about 4 acres of apples we've got. So really, my wife Kathe and I do all the work. So besides picking, and that depends on what the year's like. Last year was not a very good year, but variable. I'm just sure, just like the grapes.
Yeah, just like grapes, the weather can snap you.
Yeah, oh yeah. And 2 years ago, there was a day in the fall in October that it went from like 60 to 0 overnight, and man, it knocked a lot of people on their butts.
Yeah, October.
Yeah,
October 2020.
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
Yeah. So your orchards are in Hotchkiss.
Hotchkiss, yeah.
Yeah, a great area to grow fruit.
Yeah, I mean that's traditionally
apples.
What was there? Cherries, grapes,
pears.
Yeah, and we've had some good pears. We planted some pears, and so the analogy of the cider apples are Perry pears, and some of these they're little tannin bombs. You eat one of these things and you can't generate enough spit to spit it out. It's like unbelievable. So that little of that goes a long way. But we've got some dessert pears. We probably about 75% dessert pear and 25% Perry pears. They're nice.
And then pear cider, of course.
Yeah. Well, Perry is sort of a term, yeah.
Is that a term?
Pear cider is something in the U.S. that people blend apple and pear, but
okay.
Yeah. So
well, let's crack something open today. We've got there's 4, right? We have 4 ciders here to try.
Well, the lightest thing is this Radl'ah that you have. Do you want to try that? You drink this all the time.
Yeah, we carry that one.
All right. Let's do the block 1.
Yeah.
So this is the first one we made from our apples.
From your apples.
Yeah, from the very first block of apples.
All right.
So this
I should have you autograph my bottle. But I've been holding on to this thing for 5 years, you're telling me? That's good.
Yeah.
We're drinking cider out of a wine glass.
Yeah.
Which is okay, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, but we
like to be fancy every once in a while.
Put it in anything.
Yeah.
All right, but we're so what should I do? Should I sniff it just like wine?
I call it. It's funny. It depends on. I do this thing in Michigan occasionally. There's a wine competition, and the guy that has done the styles calls that. I call it a blossom characteristic. He calls it fermentation, but on the nose, it smells to me like apple blossoms.
Wow, it's really good. The dryness is what you get. It coats your mouth, and then of course it's lightly carbonated.
Right.
But I get all this flavor and really good body to it without the sweetness.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I mean, people think also ciders are sweet, and they're not. I mean, the French make sort of sweeter ciders that they arrest the fermentation and they don't let them terminate completely. So there's some residual sweetness, but most people ferment them to dry. So there's no sugar left at all. All the sweetness is added back. So this is still, after all that time, pretty good. So it has some tannin. We had, I think, 4 different bittersweets at the time here and some dessert fruit. But, a lot of people, when I first started getting into this, The Botany Desire was a Michael Pollan book, and PBS did a little documentary on it. And it was, have you ever read that?
No, I have not.
It's about tulips, potatoes, apples, marijuana, and maybe potatoes. Botany Desire. But in the apple section, he interviews this guy, Steve Wood, is sort of the godfather of cider in the United States. And he always talks about, if you hand this to somebody and don't know what it is, and it's made from these cider apples, they wouldn't necessarily say apple because it doesn't taste like apple juice.
No, no, not at all.
They might think it's some funky wine.
And I don't really, when I smell it, it doesn't roll me like apples, but
no, it's not like,
but I definitely on the finish, I do get an apple. I have an apple leftovers.
Yeah. Aftertaste.
Aftertaste. Yeah. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for.
It's a little richer in color than, so the dessert fruit we use for most of the ciders we make, because that's where the market is because of price and everything. I mean, it's very, very light in color.
Well, this is delicious. This is called Block 1.
Block 1.
Because this is from your block.
This first block of apples. So.
Yeah, And this was the first release.
Right. Yep.
I didn't even look. Is it vintage dated?
You know,
you don't do that with apples?
Well, it's illegal.
Is it really?
And they will not let us put vintages on it.
Wow.
They're really goofy about it.
Could you put a little description on the back that says, hey, we picked these apples in October.
Some people just put lot 2015 or whatever.
Yeah, there's ways around the labeling.
There's ways around it. But it's weird. They won't let us put even description of where we specifically grow it, because when we have to get label approval for these if they're over 7%. So I just did one for our last year's pick, and the TTB, our regulator, said you can't say that because you're implying viticulture area. And I'm like, well, these are apples, not grapes. That's
right.
Why is that a problem? And it's in the code. Cider can't do that. And it's like, well, that's stupid.
They just quote the code for you. They don't have to explain.
Or
nothing.
with those guys, it depends. You may get two different guys and have the same label in, and one says yes, and another guy says no. Well, The other guy said yes. Well, I have no control over what the other guy says, but you work for the same people.
And these apples these are Newtown Pippin?
No. So these,
or what do they call it?
So we have Northern Spy, Kingston Black, Golden Russet, Wixon Crab. At the time, we had Dabinet and Michelin, which are two bitter sweets. I'm sorry. We have Brown's Apple, Foxwhelp, and Major in this. And so since then, we've regrafted over the Dabinet and the Michelin. And we have a couple other bitter sweets there now. Let's see, where's that?
There's your dump cup.
All right.
I hope that's allowed in the cider world, because when you go to the beer world,
they don't. Yeah,
oh man,
I judge beer for years, and if you saw a spitter at the table, everyone gave him a dirty look.
They did me at the Great American Beer Fest one year. And that's like, hey, dude, I want to taste some beer. I don't want to be drunk and dropping glasses so they can all yell and roar.
Yeah, different crowd.
But you came from the beer industry,
yeah,
right?
I was a brew pub brewer, craft brewer.
Oh, yeah.
So about 20 years. I started with the guys that opened the Wing Coop back in 88.
Wow. So you're a beer pioneer too.
Yeah. Well,
you were brewing back when there was a handful of brewers.
I think I was involved and still on a part of Coopersmiths up in Fort Collins. We opened that in 89. I think we were the fourth brewery in the state.
Yeah.
So I've been around for quite a bit of that. It's a whole different world now.
Oh, yeah, crazy.
Yeah. So I say I'm a recovering brewmaster.
What's next?
So Grasshop-ah is something we made coming from the beer world. I wanted to try something with hops. We're winemakers, really, and so there's no hot side. We're not cooking anything. And in beer, you're putting hops in and boiling them to get bitterness. So trying to figure out a way to get that characteristic, we came up with using lemongrass. It's a hopped cider with lemongrass. And this is actually the sweetest cider we make, but it's kind of balanced by the lemongrass, we think. And so this has been, I think this is the third cider we made. And so it's been a regular of ours for over 10 years.
Yeah, you can smell the lemongrass immediately.
Yeah, and the hops, yeah.
So
it's very floral. It's got a pretty round mouthfeel because there's a fair amount of sugar in it.
Wow, almost like tea. I mean, to me, I get this green tea type of profile.
From the lemongrass. We basically steep it at room temperature. We don't heat anything up, but so it sits on the lemongrass. It's interesting. You probably could talk about supply lines and with grapes and stuff now. So we usually get lemongrass from Thailand, and all of a sudden can't get it. So we had to use Egyptian lemongrass. And so it's different, but you have to do what you have to do. Right. So
right.
We can tell the difference. I don't know. The consumer probably does as well if they're Grasshop-ah fans, but
the rest of us, no.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, we don't.
I'm not going to.
I couldn't tell you if this was Egyptian lemongrass.
This is Egyptian lemongrass. I'm not sure.
Wow, but it smells delicious. I mean, it's so fragrant. I love the smell. And it is sweeter.
Yeah.
But not...
it's not real cloying.
Yeah, not cloying. So...
Yeah. I mean, we try to be... I mean, a little sugar for as light as apples are, especially with dessert fruit, if there's no tannin structure or something you get from real cider apples, Our dry only has 2 grams of sugar, but it's just enough to give you just a little bit of mouthfeel.
Yeah.
But most of our stuff is like our biggest seller is Glider, and that's 5 grams. I think this is 12 grams, so that's the most. Even our cherry, I think our cherry's 8. So, and we make all the stuff we make from our orchard is dry, completely dry.
And you're measuring the same, like with wine would be 8 grams per liter?
I think it's per serving.
Or per serving.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
which is less than 1%, right? If it translates correctly to me,
because I think, and there's probably in the wine world, it depends on who you ask what constitutes a dry wine. There's still some residual sugar in some dry wines, right?
Right. Yeah. And it typically, like in Riesling, in the case of Riesling, it's measured in terms of the acid as well. Because you can have really high acid and you might have 2% residual sugar, but it tastes dry. It kind of falls in the dry scale.
Right. Yeah.
But same thing in wine, and even in red wines, you can have a little bit of residual sugar in there. But anything under anything, I don't know what the rule of thumb is, but you're allowed a little. You can call it dry. So,
I had a wine rep early on. I think we were doing a tasting at a liquor store or something when we first started, and she said, "Oh yeah, the adage, and it's sort of an old adage, is that people talk dry and drink sweet."
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's funny because like this, we'll have people in our tasting room say, "Oh, I really like dry ciders. Grasshop-ah is my favorite." And it's like, I told the guys that work in the tasting room, I go, just look, don't say anything, just sort of nod, because it's like, you don't want to tell them, well, that's the sweetest thing we've got.
Right.
So, and with the orchard stuff, sometimes, like we'll do cinnamon to be judged and stuff, we'll get feedback that this is too sweet. There's no sugar in that. You're confusing flavor with sweetness.
Right.
It's 2 different things.
Yeah, which is so common in wine that there's, especially in white wines, you can have fruitiness without residual sugar, because of your fermentation process. Right. When you ferment cold, you enhance that fruit. So a lot of people interpret that to be sweetness when it's really just fruit. It's the fruit characteristic. Right. So
same thing in cider. I mean, as an industry, we've sort of been our own worst enemy because we've put all these flavorings and stuff in, and so people are kind of confused as to what, the purists say cider is just apple. Mm-hmm. And that's what the government says, and that's what the purists say. But the market is it's cider plus. So most of the market is made with dessert fruit, and there's something added into it for flavor.
Yeah, well.
And that's why
purists can drink. They can drink what they want to drink, and everyone else,
Exactly, yeah. And then, and coming from the beer world and then kind of starting out in this, we look at things like the seltzer, a hard seltzer category, and it's just mystifying to me. I just don't get it, but I'm an old guy, so.
Yeah, me too.
I asked my nieces who are in their 20s, and they're like, "Oh, it tastes good, and there's no carbs." And
the Radl'ah is kind of your
lowest alcohol.
Your lowest alcohol, lightest cider.
Yeah, it's 4%. So, I mean, the dry 6.5. So, I mean, 6.5, it slows you down a little bit more than a 4% one. So, but that's pretty much in the range of what it is.
Right.
You're not really altering it at all. Some of the guys, the old adage about adding water to get to alcohol, this guy that used to teach these cider classes, come over from UK, always called them river apples. You use a lot of river apples in that.
Because that was adding the water.
Adding the water, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's what's fun about doing the things from the orchard. I mean, it is what it is. So, we don't do anything to it. We press the apples and ferment it. And so some years, like last year, I'm not sure why, but the gravities were a little lower. The bricks was a little lower than before. I mean, we have these golden russets, which are sort of a heirloom apple. They came in one year at 25 bricks, which is pretty high for an apple.
Wow, yeah. Yeah.
And if you ferment that straight, it tastes like a Sauvignon Blanc or something. It's real.
Sure.
It has more of the alcohols are higher.
And you'd be up around 13, 14%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's unusual.
I never thought of that, but like when you're ready to harvest or you're getting close to harvest, you'd be just like grapes. You're checking juice levels, acid levels, sugar levels, all that, pH.
Yeah, mostly for us, it's sugar levels, and we do starch test on it just to see if there's no starch left in sugars. But last several years, we've just been trying to beat the weather. 3 years ago, we waited a little long, and some apples froze in the trees. That freeze came by. And then the next year, we got everything off, and that's when that bad freeze happened. We had trees that, they hadn't started to harden off yet, and the trunks just split in half. I mean, they just exploded.
Yeah.
And the wine guys, my next door neighbor grows wine grapes up there, and he lost almost everything. The grapes just weren't ready to go dormant yet.
Yeah.
So we've been sort of just picking, we're like watching the horizon, and we got to get them in.
Yeah, that's how we do it in grapes.
Did someone come in?
Somebody did come in. Hello? Yeah, I'll be right down.
Yeah, go ahead.
We'll take 5 for a growler refill. Be right back. Yep, welcome back to Denver Wine Radio. Sitting here with Brad Page, owner of Colorado Cider Company. Been around for a long time. I mean, in the cider world. And you'd mentioned 15 to 20 cideries now in Colorado?
Yeah.
So, and they're lumped in with the wineries because it's made under a winery license.
Right. Yeah.
So we had talked about this last month or so. We think there's 177 wineries, which
right?
includes cideries in that number in Colorado now. So like in the cider world, you've seen growth, obviously, from you were number 2, first one in Denver, and now there's 15 to 20 scattered around. And so what is it in the cider world? Would you like to see that number double? Would that create more excitement around cider?
Yeah, I mean, probably. I mean, I think we're in a bit of a trough, and whether it's because we're really not in an apple growing area, or there's so much competition for us in the can segment with hard kombucha and seltzer and all this stuff that's lower alcohol. And, the consumers are young and moving around on what they drink. And I think in the wine industry, it's sort of mature. I mean, I didn't really become a wine drinker until a little bit later. I was a beer drinker, obviously, earlier. And so I think cider's sort of been one of these things that it's trendy in a way, then it's had some market share taken away from it from these other things. But in the long run, I think it's here to stay because it's a traditional beverage. And I always say, I can see in 10 or 15 years, there'll be trips to Europe, cider trips, right? And there have been some, but you're never going to have let's go to France where the traditional hard seltzer comes from, because it's basically made from sugar and artificial flavors. There's no historical background to it. I mean, cider has got a long, long pedigree. So.
Right.
Maybe hard kombucha, I don't know. But I mean, kombucha used to be a health drink that had no alcohol in it. I'm a little confused as to why that's a thing. Healthy alcohol. If you could, it's like Guinness used to have their advertising. It used to be Guinness is good for you. Those were the days.
Oh wow! Yeah, there were some guys brewing kombucha here down like in the complex,
right
upstairs in one of the units.
Things blow up.
Well, I think they had a few issues, but and this was at least 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago. So I was curious about the product. I'd never really heard of it, but they were experimenting, didn't go anywhere with it. Ultimately, the more I studied it and tasted it, I didn't want any part of that inside the winery. I didn't want that yeast strain in here to contaminate.
Yeah, because, I mean, it used to be live cultures and there's a digestive aspect to it, and it's not something you want around.
And it's not my favorite product.
You made these guys walk through sanitizer before they came in the winery.
Yeah, that's the Crooked Stave guys for sure, because they do all those Brett beers.
But Chad, I think he has like dedicated lines, right? He's got clean lines, but I'm not sure how effective that is. But I think we'd love more cideries. I just don't know where the market is for it now. I mean, some of the newer guys that have opened more recently have been more farm-based. There's quite a little scene down in the Four Corners over in Delta County, Palisade and stuff. It's just that, there's not a lot of apples grown in Colorado. And it's a beer crazy town too. So, I mean, it's come a long way from when I started, but there's a lot more players in there. So I think it's just going to take a lot longer.
Yeah. Cause distribution's been part of your model since you started.
Yeah. We weren't really retail oriented. I mean, coming from the brew pub business, I really didn't want to be a bar. So that was probably a fatal mistake on my part, but I think retail makes a lot of sense. But, we just wanted to be a manufacturer and wholesaler. So,
that's what my wife and I always said. We don't want to be a bar. And then, the more we went along, the more we turned into a wine bar.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, the margins are good, and that's why brew pubs work so well. But, there was a period where the brew pubs sort of were on a downward trend, and the manufacturing breweries were on an upward trend. And then this whole tasting room thing happened. We didn't have to have a restaurant. And so that was, not having to have a restaurant, just selling beer over the bar is incredibly profitable. So that's why there was just an explosion in Denver of tasting rooms with breweries. So,
and I think now in general especially for the wine industry, the way I see it, there's so many establishments just to go drink that you have to be, if you are a winery in the city, you have to operate like a wine bar. You have to.
Yeah.
The traditional tasting experience is just not there.
No.
If I don't have live music, if I don't do other things, then, I'll get we get some people, we get some tourists,
right,
or a few other people, but mostly, I mean, we've built a community, and that's what's nice, is bringing people together. So.
Right.
So it's not a bad thing.
No. More power to you.
Thank you. All right. What else did you bring?
Well, I brought the Kingston Black. So,
what's that all about?
Kingston Black is a variety of apple. There's a Haken cider here in Aurora, makes some amazing ciders, and he's sort of looked at it from a wine standpoint where he does a lot of single varietals. So it's just the one apple. Traditionally, ciders over in Europe are blends because there are very few apples that have just the right acid and pH blend.
Sure.
You have to blend. So Kingston Black is one that has always been considered a single varietal. So the balance is right in the apple. Daniel does amazing things with a bunch of single varietals, but this is the first one we've made just from this one apple. So these are bitter sharps, Kingston Blacks.
Wow, this has a nice golden color to it.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's the first year we kind of had a big enough harvest of the one single.
Wow, it has such a bright, almost citrusy
it's a spicy,
aroma.
A little bit of spicy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like you think of like a North African orange or something that's not just a table orange, but it's got a kind of a spiciness to it. And that's what all these apples, they have such a different character. We've won some medals with this one, and this has been something we've been really proud of, this Kingston Black.
Yeah, super flavorful, but man, then but dry, and the acid is so good on the finish.
Yeah.
Makes your mouth water.
Makes you want to have another drink.
Yeah. Makes me want to have fish and chips.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, this is a nice cider.
Wow, that's delicious. Man, I could become a cider drinker, I think.
Yeah, the problem is there's not that much of these around, and it's hard for the liquor stores to sell them, and
yeah.
So it's pretty specialized things. But once people get into them, I mean, they're really into them. So. And
you have this bottled in a 750.
Yeah. And that's the dilemma, I think, is I mentioned Steve Wood earlier. He's gone to trying to do some cans. But, once you get into a can, 4-pack is 48 ounces of cider, and then the can thing has been just horrendous for everybody. If you're small, our price for cans have doubled in the last year.
Yeah. So
I don't know. I look at these ciders as more like something you have with a meal and you share it with friends. So the 750 to me makes sense because it's not like a single serving cider. It's good with food. The acid's there. So, I mean, the Spanish have it down. They have cheese and, prosciutto or jamon crudo, whatever. And,
yeah,
it's just the whole thing. So cider is just sort of an accompaniment to that kind of food.
Well, I'm digging it. This is awesome.
Yeah, those are good. So right now we have, I think we have 5 Orchard Series ciders on tap at the tasting room. We have a Perry, so we make 100% pear from the orchard. We just put on what we call Page Tree Blend from last year's harvest. We're about to put on Wixon Crab, which is 100% crab apple. These crabs they're bigger than like the normal Denver crabs you see,
Okay.
but they're pretty high acid. It's not as sharp as some, but it's going to be really nice. And then this year it looks like we have a good fruit set, so we'll have more cider coming.
Nice.
Yeah.
What about barrel aging in ciders? Is that a thing, or?
Yeah, it is a thing. We've done some. We make a Pome Mel, so we distill some cider. It's kind of like, I always describe it as a apple port. So it's a fortified cider. So we just take distilled cider, which would, if you age that in a barrel, it'd be brandy, like apple brandy or Calvados or something. But we put it in with fresh apple juice and age it in barrels. We do some barrel aging. It's tough to me because it's so light bodied that especially we like rum barrels and white wine barrels because they're a little less assertive. But if you get into like whiskey barrels and stuff, it's all you taste.
Yeah.
So with this fortified cider, it's higher alcohol and there's enough sugar in the apple juice that it can handle a little bit more barrel aging. But Katie, who's one of our cider makers, really likes the barreled stuff, and I just say I'm an old guy, so all I taste is barrel. But I mean, I think for certain applications, it's good. So we just we work with Lenny up at Deer Hammer in Buena Vista. We just sent him some cider to distill today, and so he sends us some whiskey barrels, and we do some stuff with that. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah, it's fun.
And that's stuff you could get at the cidery, right?
Yeah.
That wouldn't be out on the shelf, but you're around. Your cider's around statewide.
Yeah. I mean, we're
you're everywhere,
pretty much statewide, and
you self distribute.
No, we're with Elite Brands.
Okay,
and then High Country, the Coors distributor up north on the Western Slope. But so yeah, it's been weird out in the market. So during the pandemic, about half our sales were on premise, restaurants and bars. And that wasn't just draft, that was cans too. So we lost half our business overnight. Almost all of our business is cans. And as things have started opening up, the draft has gone crazy and so the balance has changed again. So I guess it just shows people are getting out because our draft sales have really gone up. But it's trying times in the liquor world these days. Especially from a cost. I mean, everything we buy is so damn expensive.
Yes, I know. Yeah, everything is up, and it's brutal.
Yeah, but it's alcohol, so
yeah. We always have the alcohol portion.
We always have that.
Thank you. Okay, so what's coming up this summer? What's in the future for Colorado Cider Company?
We'll work on a couple of specialty ciders and trying to get the orchard in shape. That's about it. Just plugging along. So, I mean, our tasting room's open on the weekends, and we have 20 ciders on tap. And one of the things we do every year is make a fresh hop cider. So we were working with a hop company in Paonia, and we get fresh hop flowers and do dry hopping. And we had 4 different one of those, and he went out of business. He decided not to grow hops anymore. So he's gone. I think there's a guy in Montrose we've been talking to, but for a while there, they thought the hop industry would work in Colorado, and I think Coors guaranteed purchase for some of these guys.
Okay.
But that's kind of, who owns Miller Coors? It's another global beer corp thing. I think they didn't want to indulge the local native.
Oh, so,
yeah, native. So I don't know. Something happened with that. So, although there's a bunch of those now. But anyways, our buddy at Highwire pulled up all his hop vines. So.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
The hop shortage, I mean, this was 10 years ago. There was a big hop shortage.
Yeah.
But that's all.
Well, yeah, it's not a hop shortage. I mean, I think the problem with Colorado hops is they don't have access to some of the more popular, the hop industry in the Northwest. They have patents on a lot of these hybrid hops and stuff. And like everything, it's just more expensive to grow here. There's no economies of scale. So, they were having a hard time competing.
Well, all right.
Well, hey, thanks for having me, Paul. That was fun.
Yeah, thanks for coming down. This was a lot of fun.
I've got to keep, I wish I hadn't missed a Chaka Khan night here. I don't know who's next.
Oh man, I have surprises coming up next you're talking about Vinny and Vinyl. That's our wine and record club. So yeah, Chaka Khan, good. That was a good release this month. And, coming up next month, I have to put some thought into it and see, what everybody's requesting. We're licking our chops for, the Silk Sonic album release August 12th. So we'll have that one in the house.
Oh, good.
That's the Bruno Mars Anderson Paak combo. But yeah. So thanks for asking. Colorado Cider Company. Man, they are the pioneers in Colorado for cider. Available everywhere. Pick up some cider these days and you'll be surprised.
Thanks, Paul.
You're welcome. Cheers.
That's our show for this week. Thank you so much for listening to Denver Wine Radio. Your homework for the week is to go out and taste some Colorado wine. If you have any questions or comments, or just want to let us know what you're drinking, go to denverwineradio.com, where you can email us or leave us a voice message. We'd love to hear from you. And remember, put some altitude in your glass.
Produced and distributed by the Sound Off Media Company.